I'm Dr. Eric Benjamin, and I'm the interim vice president and provost of the Rockville campus of Montgomery College. And one of the things that we highly value at Montgomery College is the value of experiential learning. And experiential learning just isn't the content in the classroom and the training in our labs. It's the ability to come together as informed citizens and engage in public, respectful, and civil discourse. And so tonight I would like to welcome you to Globe Hall for our panel discussion, January 6th, the Capitol Police and Defense of Democracy. And the coincidence today is that today's President's Day is, I'm sure, not missed on anyone in the room. And interestingly enough, there are a handful of days in American history that are simply known by the date. The 4th of July, December 7th, 9/11, and now January 6th. On January 6th, we watched an attack on not just the seat of American democracy, but on the symbol of global democracy. On January 6th, we saw how fragile the experiment of democracy truly is. And we also saw the defense of our democracy. The members of the Capitol and Metropolitan Police risked and gave their lives, not in defense of whom they voted or out of allegiance to a particular political party, but out of defense of our democracy, out of defense of our Constitution. So we're here tonight to bear witness to their firsthand account. Thank you. Professor Robinson, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Benjamin. We at MC couldn't be more honored to host this panel of officers from the Capitol and Metropolitan Police Departments and to engage in constructive dialogue with all of you regarding the role that law enforcement plays in the protection and preservation of our democratic institutions and processes. Because when we envision our democracy, I believe we often think about the three branches of government or the elected or appointed officials who occupy those very visible seats of power within our government. But we pay far less attention to the critical contributions of other members of government, including those members who serve in the law enforcement capacity and who swear an oath to defend the institutions and values that we, as residents of this country, hold so dear. So now I'd like to introduce you to our panelists, but before I do so, I want to acknowledge two members of our Montgomery College family who also dutifully served on January 6th, 2021. The first is Officer Mike Lanzicki, a member of the Dignitary Protection Division, and the son-in-law of counseling professor Harry Zaran. And the second is an MC alumnus of whom we couldn't be prouder, Lieutenant Greg Demnicki. Lieutenant, if you're here, I would love for you to wave or to identify yourself so that we are able to acknowledge you. And we would like to thank you for your service, not only on that fateful day, but every day. And now, on to our panel. So we're sort of rearranged here. So let me rearrange my notes. To my far left is Michael Fanone. Michael Fanone served as a Metropolitan Police Department officer assigned to the 1st District for 20 years prior to his retirement in 2021 after sustaining numerous injuries during the January 6th attack on the Capitol. Working briefly as a patrol officer and then spending the majority of his career as a vice investigator in various small mission units, Fanone participated in over 2,000 arrests for violent crimes and narcotics trafficking, served as a special task force officer for the FBI, ATF, and DEA, and earned more than 36 commendations for his work. Fanone currently serves as an analyst for CNN, a security consultant, and a firearms instructor. He is also the author of the New York Times best-selling book, Hold the Line: The Insurrection and One Cop's Battle for America's Soul. On January 6th of this year, Officer Fanone was awarded the Presidential Citizens Medal of Honor by Joe Biden. And to the right of Officer Fanone, Mike, is Harry Dunn. Harry Dunn joined the U.S. Capitol Police, also known as USCP, in 2008, and since 2011, he has served at the officer rank as Private First Class, or PFC. PFC Dunn is assigned to a USCP First Responder unit that is responsible for maintaining perimeter security around the exterior of the U.S. Capitol. PFC Dunn has been on duty for presidential inaugurations, joint sessions of Congress, and State of the Union addresses, as well as hundreds of peaceful protests and demonstrations. He's also served as a crisis intervention officer, responsible for assisting individuals who may be experiencing a mental crisis, and as a member of USCP crisis negotiation teams trained to respond to hostage or barricade situations. PFC Dunn also participates in USCP programs and activities to promote equity, diversity, and inclusion within the United States Capitol Police. Dunn has been honored with numerous awards, including the Congressional Gold Medal, the Presidential Citizens Medal, the Capitol Police Service Medal, the Capitol Police Achievement Medal, and the Concerned Black Men Award, just to name a few. Dunn graduated from James Madison University in 2005 with a Bachelor of Science degree in Health Science with a concentration in public health education. He lives in Silver Spring with his daughter, Daphne. And to the right of Harry is Officer Daniel Hodges. Daniel Hodges joined the Washington, D.C. Metropolitan Police Department in 2014. He was assigned to and continues to be in patrol in the 4th District. Officer Hodges has received multiple awards for his services, including a commendation medal for responding to a man brandishing a gun and threatening MPD officers and taking him into disarming and surrendering. Officer Hodges was also assigned to the Civil Disturbance Unit 42, a rapid response platoon that is equipped with non-standard defensive gear and is activated for policing a variety of First Amendment assemblies, protests, and riots. On January 6, 2021, Officer Hodges responded with CDU 42 to the attacks on the U.S. Capitol as Capitol Police units were overrun. Officer Hodges fought the terrorists assaulting the Capitol on the West Lawn, the West Terrace, and in the tunnel leading out to the inaugural platform, sustaining injuries in the process. While fighting in the tunnel, he was crushed by rioters in the West Terrace doors of the Capitol and beaten. He returned to full duty within a month and continues to serve as an officer. Officer Hodges testified in the first public hearing of the United States House Select Committee to investigate the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol, giving firsthand account of what transpired and setting the tone for the investigation to follow. Officer Hodges testified as a witness in the civil trial of former Otero County, New Mexico Commissioner Coy Griffin. Following the trial, the judge ordered Griffin be removed from office effective immediately, ruling that the attack on the Capitol was an insurrection and that Griffin's participation in it disqualified him under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. This decision marks the first time since 1869 that a court has disqualified a public official under Section 3, and the first time that any court has ruled the events of January 6, 2021 an insurrection. In 2012, Officer Hodges joined the Virginia Army National Guard as an 11C, or indirect fire infantry. He received an Army Commendation Medal at the end of his 6-year contract and an honorable discharge in 2018. Officer Hodges studied English and conflict analysis and resolution at George Mason University. Welcome, Officer Hodges. And last but certainly not least, to my immediate left is former U.S. Capitol Police Sergeant Aquilino Ganell. Ganell immigrated to the United States from the Dominican Republic in 1992. And he has previously stated that as a child in the Dominican Republic, he looked up to the United States as a land of opportunity and a place to better himself. The first in his family to graduate from college, he joined the U.S. Army after graduating and eventually became a police officer. Sergeant Ganell was awarded the Congressional Gold Medal and the Presidential Citizen Award as one of the group of law enforcement officers who responded to the January 6th attack on the Capitol. He sustained multiple injuries during the events that day, which he described in harrowing detail to the House panel. Running out of oxygen at one point, Ganell feared for his life. The attack, he said, was, quote, like something from a medieval battle, end quote. Scarier than anything he had experienced in the 545 days he served in Iraq. Ganell has said that as an immigrant to the United States, he is especially proud to have defended the U.S. Constitution and our democracy on January 6th, and that he hopes that everyone in a position of authority in our country has the courage and conviction to do their part by investigating what happened on that terrible day and why. In addition to being a devoted public servant, Sergeant Ganell is also a published author. His book, American Shield, The Immigrant Sergeant Who Defended Democracy, is forthcoming on November 23rd. Welcome, Sergeant Ganell. So we would like for this to be a very interactive discussion, and we appreciate all of you for being here this evening. As you can see, there are mics on either side of the room, so if you have questions for the officers, please don't be shy. This conversation belongs as much to all of you as it does to us here on the stage. So I will begin by asking the first question of the officers, and then please, we invite you to join in the conversation. I do want to note, however, that some of the gentlemen here are witnesses to ongoing civil and criminal investigations and are occasionally called upon to provide testimony for ongoing litigation. So there may be some questions that they are unable to answer. If that is the case, they will let you know that they are unable to answer, but they have all assured me that they will endeavor to be as transparent as possible. Right? So the first question that I would like to ask of all of you, because we are talking about the intersection of law enforcement and the role that law enforcement plays in the protection of our democracy and our institutions. So I would like to know, throughout your careers, how you viewed the role of law enforcement in the protection of our democracy and how, if at all, that view has changed since the events on January 6th. Aquilino? Or would you like someone else to start?
No, that's fine. In my case, thanks for having me, by the way. Good evening, everybody. In my case, law enforcement career was not my first option, but coming back from Iraq, that's when I realized that I wanted to continue being a public servant, and that led me to apply to several police department within the eastern region, and I ended up being here. In terms of how policing plays a role in protecting our democracy, it plays a big role. I mean, if you look at what we did on January 6th, there was nothing less than heroic for the amount of officers that we had compared to the number of rioters attacking the Capitol on multiple fronts. In that, it wasn't by chance what we did that they didn't kill anybody. So it plays a big role.
The role of law enforcement in protecting democracy is obviously large. The Army is not typically allowed to operate in the United States, so it's up to local law enforcement and, when it gets bad, the National Guard to enforce the rule of law. But the first line of defense in a democracy is its own participants, its citizens. It's everyone in this room. You know, we are the ones that are what makes democracy strong or weak is our participation in it. So while law enforcement obviously did play a huge role in preserving it and will again, it falls to all of us initially. And that's something that we should all keep in mind.
Well, hey, good evening, y'all. The way I like the way Danny alluded to how it's everybody's job to have a role in protecting democracy. Since I've been there since 2008, so I've served 3 different presidents and countless numbers of senators and congressmen and women. The thing about it is the person who occupies that seat will continue to change. That seat won't change though. That seat will remain hundreds of years. So it doesn't matter who's in the seat. It's our job to protect that seat. So everybody has a job, from you all voting to us protecting the seat that y'all put them in, whether we agree with that person or not. Because, like I said, the accountability is at the ballot box. So it's our job to make sure that y'all have something to vote for when it comes down to election time.
So I spent the majority of my career working in narcotics. I was a street cop, and I think after I took the oath, where we swear, loyalty or allegiance to protect and defend the American Constitution, that was probably the last time I thought about the Constitution and the role of law enforcement in protecting it. My interactions were at a micro level. I arrested drug dealers, drug traffickers, people that committed violent crimes, and I didn't really look at it as anything other than keeping my community safe. It was the same thing on January 6th. I heard distress calls coming from the Capitol, and like hundreds of other police officers that heard them, we responded. I didn't go there thinking that I was protecting the seat of democracy. I just went there thinking that I was trying to protect other police officers. It wasn't until afterwards, in retrospect, that I was able to sit through the select committee hearings and see the evidence and what really took place and transpired outside of the 4 corners of that day. In the efforts of elected leaders and members of the government trying to subvert democracy. And so for me, yes, law enforcement, myself, played a role in protecting democracy, but that was the furthest thing from my mind on January 6th, and for the 2 decades prior to that, that I was a cop.
I think we have an audience question.
Yeah, I got a couple of quick questions. Officer Bernard, I've read your book and I've talked to some of the other officers, and I get a deep sense of sort of betrayal in terms of what happened that day. A lot of things happened, and that people didn't sort of stand by you. In that audience, for instance, was sort of the audience that we sort of think of as the Blue Lives Matter crowd, the one that sort of burst in and all of that. And then after that, there was a vote to overthrow the election. And then even beyond that, and I'd like you guys to just talk about your sense of whether you thought people let you down that day or a little bit after that day. Officer But on you and Harry, I know went and talked to police department, police officials about backing you and supporting you and some things like that. And the second thing is, you guys alluded to it. What do we as citizens need to do to make sure that nothing like that happens again? You guys really were the force that kept that, you know, the Republicans were arguing the other day and having 15 votes about who was going to be the new speaker. If it weren't for you guys, they might not have even been able to have that vote. So what can we as citizens do, you think, to go forth and make that institution stronger? So those two questions, one's about the betrayal, and then what do we as the public, what should we be doing? That's it.
Well, in terms of in reference to your first question, yes, it is a betrayal. The sense of feeling betrayed by a lot of people who we risk our lives for, especially on January 6th when most of them were running for their lives and we were fighting for our lives, trying to protect them. The moral injury that caused led us to that betrayal, feeling disappointed, betrayed. And what can you guys do? I say when you vote, make sure you're picking somebody who has a good moral compass, somebody who will be a good leader, not a grifter, somebody who has the best interest of not only you, but everybody who lives in the same house or in the same country, rather than what can I get out of that position. And that's, I guess, my best analogy. So.
Yeah, there was definitely betrayal on January 6th and following that day. Everything from the people on the ground attacking the Capitol to certain people in Congress and the President of the United States. He knew that that crowd was armed. He knew that they had ill intentions, and he still sent them to the Capitol anyway. And following January 6th, there's people in Congress saying that what happened was just a tourist visit, that it wasn't that bad, that we overreacted, and they're trying to hide what happened, cover it up, whitewash it, whatever you want to call it, and that's a betrayal. So yeah, but there's plenty of betrayal going around. You just have to do your best to fight the good fight. Don't let it deter you from doing your job and moving forward. With regards to what the general population can do to protect democracy is be civically engaged. You know, it's always very depressing when I see the vote turnout numbers, what percentage of the country votes, and it's even only in the largest elections. Be involved in local elections, local politics, because that's where it all starts. That's where most politicians get their start. Have good media literacy, have good critical thinking skills, observe the news with clear eyes, don't let your biases get the better of you, don't let confirmation bias guard against it, I should say. And you know, when you talk with your neighbors and others in the country who have different views from you, do your best to be polite and engage them and try to empathize and find common ground. Because if, I completely understand that sometimes that's not possible, but it's the only way we can bring some people back to the realm of normalcy. And that's really what we need. Because if things keep going like this, I don't know how we're gonna make it work.
One of the things that I've been very consistent about and very adamant about is that regarding January 6th, we can debate and have discussions about why certain things happened, but we cannot debate about what happened. The facts are the facts about what happened that day. We look at it, we saw it with our own eyes, we experienced it, you all saw it, the entire world saw it. So we can debate why it happened, sure, or should it have happened, whatever. We could debate all of that. But what happened and what these men and women that day went through, the lieutenant up there, what we went through that day, that's not up for discussion. So that's one of the things. We need to be very fact-based. So when we talk about betrayal, that's the sense of betrayal that I get, that the individuals, and Mike said this many times, that the hell that we went through, they want to tell us that it doesn't exist or it didn't exist. Like, that's not up for debate. What we went through happened, period. We could talk about something else, but that's not up for discussion. Another thing about the betrayal, Mike has maybe a better recollection about it. I was very emotional when we went to the FOP and wondering why they weren't having our back and standing up for us and speaking out against us. Hell, in fact, there was a member of the Chicago Police Department who was arrested on January 6th because of the riots, and the FOP legal team defended him in his court proceedings. You want to talk about betrayal? That's a sense of betrayal that I find. What you all can do, everybody says you all can vote. I'm going to take it one step further. You all cannot get frustrated when things don't go the way that you want. Like, you can't just take your ball and go home because the person that you voted for didn't get elected. You have to persist and keep on fighting. Like, us four guys have been ramming our heads into these walls consistently, and the wall's not moving, but we're still trying. We're going to keep on chipping away a little bit as we can. If we can change one person's mind, two persons' mind, don't get frustrated. Get frustrated, but don't quit. Don't take your ball and go home, to use a metaphor. Keep on keeping on. You have to stay engaged, because they want you to get complacent. They want you to stop. They want you to stop. And the minute you stop, they win. So.
Betrayal. Yeah. That started for me on January 6th when I was sitting in my office and I looked at my partner, Jimmy, and I told him that, he and I were going to suit up, put a uniform on, something I hadn't done in over a decade, and go to the Capitol. And other members of our office, people that I had worked alongside of for some more than a decade, opted not to go. I don't know why. I've never spoken to them again. I don't know if it was cowardice or indifference, maybe, a mixture of both. But I couldn't dwell on that. I just, moved on. I think for me, what was most difficult was, I spoke to a lot of people about testifying before Congress. And there were a lot of officers that I felt were well-suited witnesses to what happened that day that opted not to testify before Congress. And they had their own reasons, and I respect that. But just to let you in on, something that may not be well known, is that invitations were extended to hundreds of officers to just sit in, the well of the gallery and support the other cops that, had the balls to go up there and raise their right hand and testify as to what happened to them. And no one showed up. Not one goddamn officer. And I'm convinced that had officers at least taken the time to show up and support the four of us testifying as to what we experienced on January 6th, that I would not have, nor Harry, Dan, or Ganell, experienced the amount of threats and targeting that we had, because it wouldn't have just been 4 cops testifying about what happened. It would have been 400 cops standing unified and with 4 representatives testifying as to their experience that day. But we had none, and so it allowed for us to be singled out, to be disparaged in the media, which I found ironic, considering the fact that I was probably the #1 Fox News viewer in America. I used to leave Fox News on when I wasn't home because I wanted their ratings to stay fucking high. And then I became like the pundit of, Tucker Carlson and Laura Ingraham and all these other yahoos. So, that was a difficult pill to swallow. And then, it was all downhill from there for me. I got, they put baby in a corner when I came back to work. And I realized that my law enforcement career was never going to be the same. I'm not a desk jockey. Not, disparaging those. One of my earliest mentors told me, different strokes for different folks. Somebody's got to write reports and other people have got to kick the doors in. I preferred kicking doors in, but that was done. And I still feel to this day that the dignity that I deserved in returning to work was stripped away from me. And so, during the introduction, it was said that I retired. I did not retire, I resigned. I was pissed off. I've been a cop for 20 years. Like this very nice young lady said, I participated in thousands of arrests, put my neck out there on the line hundreds and hundreds of times, dealt with all the, shit that comes along with a law enforcement career. And I got shat on by my fellow officers for standing up and telling the truth about what happened to me on January 6th. And by doing so, was really, at least in my mind, representing all of their experiences, because hundreds of cops experienced things very similar to what I did on January 6th. Hundreds of cops went to the hospital after January 6th. Dozens of cops lost their careers as a result of the injuries that they sustained on January 6th. And so I wasn't seeking limelight. If you know me, you know that I enjoy a life of obscurity. And, look forward, hopefully, one day to returning to that. But that wasn't in the cards. So, yes, I feel betrayed. And not to piggyback off any of these guys' excellent answers to the second part of that question, I would say I've traveled all over the country in promotion of my book, and I've had hundreds of conversations with people. And people always start the conversation with, we probably don't agree on anything other than the fact that, Donald Trump's and January 6th happened. And I'm like, people are way more nuanced than you give them credit for. We probably agree on a whole hell of a lot more than we disagree on. So it would probably behoove you to just have a conversation with people rather than drawing your own conclusions based on, what they look like or how they talk. That would be my recommendation. I think that we've become so divided in this country that we've forgotten about the fact that we're all Americans, and there are a lot of things that that we have in common. And I think if we could return to that, we could start to find a way to talk about some of the more difficult issues.
So you all talk about experiencing this very deep sense of betrayal, but Mike, you're also talking about engaging people in dialogue, and Danny, you're talking about the importance of civility. I'm wondering if you could speak a bit to how you bring yourself to that place where you can engage in conversation with a neighbor or someone with whom you disagree so deeply, right? And continue to recognize their humanity and strive towards civility when we are in such a polarized space.
It's not easy. There's, I don't have to tell you guys the insane belief systems and conspiracy theorists out there that are really mainstream now. And these people are members of Congress. We just had a member of Congress today say that red states should secede. And So yeah, how do you talk to someone like that as a fellow American? Well, you know, you can't start out with high concepts, things like governance, and you have to start out like, hey, I like food, do you eat? What do you like to eat? How do you get your food? And then you move up from there, like, okay, so do you have enough money for food? What would help you feed your family? And then move on from there, because everybody wants the same things when it comes down to it. They want to be able to feed their family and to be loved and grow old. These are things that everybody has in common. And it's using that as a jumping point, you can find more common ground in more high concept areas of life, and including politics and government. And if you start out at a very base level, you find that you'll have a lot more in common with people than you might realize.
Is there anything anyone else like to add?
Yeah, I kind of like I said earlier, some things aren't up for debate or up for discussion. Like I said, debating facts. Sure, like I have my beliefs, I have my morals, and everybody doesn't live by the same morals and values, and that's fine. However, you can choose not to engage with those people. Sure, you can have common discussions. Is there anything that I can say to you that can get you to change your mind, your opinion, your stance? Anything? No. All right, have a good day. That's it. But if somebody's willing to have a discussion, you can tell that some people want to talk, and some people just want to argue, and some people just want to be heard. You know, give people an opportunity to state what they want, and then you move accordingly. I have a little bit more patience. Obviously, being a police officer, you let people talk. You just let them talk, and some people, like I said, they just want to be heard, and they'll say, all right, now have a good day. And they'll walk away after just yelling at you for like 10 minutes. And they'll tell you, have a good day. All right. So they just wanted to get some stuff off their chest. And that's sometimes just people who just want to be heard. However, like I said, when people show you who they are, you know, believe them. That's who they are. They showed you who they are, so believe. Don't expect, you know, you get more roses than shit and whatever that saying is, you know. Whatever that saying goes, but like I say, you could just engage people and see where, just talk to people. One thing I don't do is I don't debate facts, though. Facts are facts, and that's it.
Yeah. Go ahead, yeah.
Go ahead.
Mike?
I struggle with that all the time. I mean, every single day. Most of the time, man, I'm a do as I say, not as I do kind of person when it comes to those things, because I just, like, I have a very distinctive line, and, you know, once that's crossed or once somebody crosses it, I'll be honest, like, I feel like my career in law enforcement taught me that some people only understand one language, and that's getting punched in the face. That being said, I found that, like, those people, there's not as many of them as I originally thought, and most people fall in like that large kind of center between the extreme left and the extreme right. And so I found most people being much more easy to talk to, even about January 6th, even if you're, you know, a diehard Trump supporter, not just a Republican, but a Trump supporter. I guess I've just been fortunate in the conversations that I've had with people. But yes, there's people that have crossed the line, and you know, it's only the fear of going to prison that prevents me from doing things that what I'd like to do.
Aquilino?
He's serious. He's not joking. Like, y'all are like laughing. He's so serious, though.
I was about to say the same thing, like he's not joking.
That's why it's nervous laughter.
I don't know, in my case, just like Mike, I wrestle with that question because I have people, some of them my neighbors and people, family members as well, that ask me, was it really that bad? I'm like, dude, I'm telling you what happened to me. I lived it. I had the injury. You saw me with a cast on my shoulder for 3 or 4 months. You saw me with a cast on my foot for 3 or 4 months. What else do you want me to tell you? How bad that was? Should I have lost my life? So I don't know. I think if January 6th was done by Hillary Clinton supporters, then I think maybe they will see how bad that was, and then they really will want some type of investigation. But that never happened. So because it wasn't Hillary Clinton supporter, then they don't want to deal with it. And not knowing that by downplaying this whole thing, it's prone to happen again at some point in the future. And it's hard to convince people that they should take it seriously and see the severity of how dangerously close we came to lose our democracy. So I don't know. It's a combination of all four of our perspective and what they said and what I'm telling you. It's just remain engaged at some point. Don't lose hope.
Thank you. Roberta?
Thanks. Officer Dunn alluded to the patience of a police officer. And one of the things that I found absolutely remarkable, sitting safe at home and watching the events on January 6th and crying in my living room about what was happening, was all these armed police officers showing the most insanely amazing restraint. There was, to my knowledge, only one officer who discharged their weapon. I may be wrong about that. How did you all go through this insane attack, this crazy hell that you lived through? And as a group, not use deadly force in an overwhelming way. That was probably the thing that most amazed me about the police that were there on scene today, the restraint.
Thank you for your question. I'll answer briefly. I'm sure the other officers have a large take on that also. I won't necessarily, in my particular case, won't necessarily say restraint. That question about whether to use force or not is very nuanced. Sergeant Gunnell said something earlier today. When you use deadly force, you're responsible for where every bullet goes. Like he served in Iraq. It's different here than in Iraq, and you could just spray indiscriminately in a war zone versus then at the seat of government, the U.S. Capitol. Well, not exactly. You know what I mean.
Rules of engagement.
It's different. It's different. Correct. But it's a nuanced thing. He said somebody would run up and hit him, and then duck back in the crowd, and you pull your gun out, and then that person was gone and hiding behind somebody else. And it's like you can't just start shooting at people. This is gonna sound crazy because of, like I said, the climate that's in. Police officers don't want to shoot people. We don't want to shoot people. It's the last thing that you want to do. And a lot of decisions and factors have to be met in your head and legally before you can actually shoot one round, let alone hundreds of them. So it's very nuanced. That's a very nuanced question. Everybody, I'm sure, had their own reasons why they did or did not. But it wasn't just about fear for my life, because I was scared that entire day. And that wasn't enough for me to decide to use force or not. So,
in my case, it wasn't because I did not have the reason to use my gun, my weapon. It wouldn't make a difference. It wouldn't. Because they could probably, just like they were threatening Mike Fanon by taking his gun and killing him with his own gun. there were probably thousands of people there with weapons that we didn't know. Most of them, they had backpacks. As you guys seen on the January 6th committee, they uncovered a lot of evidence to suggest that they had weapons. And none of those people that were at the Capitol grounds had gone through security search. So when I contemplated using my weapon, at some point I was like, let me give him another hit. Maybe he'll release his grip. But came very close to it. But I also, my thought process at that time, once you pull out your gun and you use it, then what? That's the last resort that a police officer has to escalate or de-escalate things. So, and once you pass that threat level, then you don't have nothing else but to keep shooting. I had 16 bullets in my chamber before one of them tried to take my gun, especially in the tunnel when, I don't know if you guys seen where I was. I was at the very mouth of the entrance. And at some point when I got injured on my shoulder, it was a free-for-all. People falling on top of each other, trying to pull me into the crowd as I was being distracted from pulling an officer that had fallen on top of shields. And it was cascading people on top of each other, riders on top of each other. Would that make any difference if I had killed one of them? Probably not. And like I said, once you make that decision to escalate, then you don't have nothing else to fall back on. So.
There's a lot of reasons we didn't use lethal force that day, by and large. Just something to consider. For the first couple hours, the first key few hours, I've read estimates that there were around 150 to 200 officers there versus about 10,000 assailants. Now, we carry something like 52 rounds on us, and 52 times 200 is 10,400. So even if we decided to just have a Kent State massacre and every single round resulted in a casualty, we might just barely come out even. Now, obviously, that's something that no officer wants to do, so we did not. Another reason that I personally didn't is that one of the last things I remember hearing on the radio before it was stolen from me in a fight was that our EOD, Explosive Ordnance Disposal Bomb Squad, had found a viable device or a bomb. And, well, at the time it was just the one, but that's one of the points I'm getting to is after it was taken, I didn't know how many more there were. There could have been hundreds in the city. And when I was fighting, I was wondering, well, why haven't they set them off yet? I thought that maybe they were waiting for us to escalate to lethal force before they decided to start setting off bombs. So that was something very present on my mind in my decision-making to not use lethal force. Additionally, we knew that they had plenty of firearms on them. Obviously, we couldn't stop and search them, but we had made plenty of gun arrests that day, the day before. And if it became a firefight between, 150, 200 officers versus 10,000 of these terrorists, then we would have lost. And we could not afford to lose. So by not escalating to lethal force, we, in a way, made it more survivable and defensible for ourselves and for members of Congress and the Vice President. I can tell you one thing that did not influence our decision that I hear a lot from liberal people is that we didn't shoot them because they're white or because they're Christian or because they're Republicans. I heard that a lot, and that's just incredibly offensive to me. That has nothing to do with demographics or political leanings. It had no bearing on our decision to use or not use force.
I agree.
Mike, is there anything you'd like to add?
I mean, ultimately, my decision was based on whether or not using my my firearm was going to raise the likelihood of my survival and ultimately I decided it wasn't, so I didn't. That's all it came down to for me.
Thank you. Take a question over here.
Well, also you assumed the cavalry was coming, correct? And it never did until, what, 6 hours?
Well, so funny you should say that. When I showed up with my partner, Jimmy Albright, and I remember coming down into the Lower West Terrace Tunnel, and I saw, who was it? Sergeant, the chubby bald guy from, that doesn't really narrow it down in this.
It's a lot of them.
It's a lot of Yeah, that narrows it down. Thanks,
Bill-
Mike.
It was Bill Bogner, and he was like looking at me like as if the cavalry had arrived. And it was just me and Jimmy, and trust me, we're we were not the cavalry. And yeah, I don't know, like I thought that every officer in the tri-state area was going to be responding to the Capitol. I didn't know anything about, the rules garnering, how the National Guard could get involved. They were there that day. They were already on posts that day. So I just assumed that they would, march their happy asses over to the Capitol and lend a hand. I didn't realize that, you had to jump through 15 different hoops before you could get those guys to turn from, traffic guards to law enforcement officers but apparently you do. And so, I mean, in the aftermath, yeah, it was frustrating. And I also think that there's this idea that that there were tens of thousands of police officers that ended up showing up. When I got there shortly after 3 p.m., there were really only a few hundred officers at the Capitol engaged between the U.S. Capitol Police and the Metropolitan Police officers that had responded. And so, it was frighteningly disproportionate with the amount of officers that we had versus rioters, really up until the bitter end. And I, to this day, I don't think that that's been appropriately represented for the American public to see how, how far up the creek we all were without a paddle.
I think when I saw that we were getting attacked and I'm on top of the stage, and after hearing the radio call, send all you got to the west front. I was in the east front, north entrance of the visitor center. And on the ground, I rushed along with my team, roughly about 40 officers. When I looked down, most of the officers, about 40 officers, were already overpowered and flanked to a corner, same corner where we went up, all of us went up once we lost the police line. But once my team got there, we pushed people out as far as we could, but we were all getting hammered and all this stuff. And then I see Metropolitan Police, Civil Disturbance Unit, the mountain bike unit, come down roughly about 40 to 60 officers. And then they stop. I'm here thinking, great, they're coming. More people are coming. And then they stop. Nobody else comes but those 60 officers. And I'm like, this is gonna be a long fucking day. And sure it was. And in the police line, we were fighting and all this stuff, and we losing ground fast. Then we bring barricades. We push everybody out to the first tier of steps on the west front plaza, and then we lose it like within 20, 30 minutes. Nobody else came up. And here I am thinking, what the fuck is the president? He's the only one who can authorize the National Guard. He's the commander-in-chief. And yet, he did not do any of those things. And the people at the Pentagon and whatnot, who was in charge at that time, they could have called the White House. I'm sure they had the number. It was a Trump appointee at that time. So whether by action or inaction, they let us down. I was hoping, coming from a military background, that the only person that can authorize military action in this country, it's the president, the commander-in-chief, not Nancy Pelosi, not anybody else. Regardless of what they tell you on the media, the commander-in-chief was Donald Trump at that time. He was the only one able to do that. Now, the governor of Maryland, I believe he deployed the National Guard and left it at the border. And those were the ones who show up after a certain amount of time, after when he decided, the former president decided to actually allow and authorize that movement. But I was hoping that more people, the local agencies in the region, and anybody who was available, freaking respond to the Capitol and assist us. You have officer as far as New York, rushing, breaking speed limits and whatnot, rushing to the Capitol, trying to get here. But the local agencies, we hardly responded. You got officers from my unit, from my detail on midnights. I used to be on midnights. And officers that had left at 11 a.m. turn around, come back. They self-deploy back to the Capitol because they saw what was happening on the news. And that was our recovery. That was our response. But the person who had the authority to do it didn't do it, and that was Donald Trump.
I've heard you all say a couple of times that no one came. No one came to support you on January 6th. No one came to support you when you testified in front of Congress. Do you think that there is something institutional about law enforcement culture to which that can be attributed? Or is there something else to which you attribute the lack of response and the lack of support?
I'll start with that one. Excuse me. I don't necessarily think that it's, it is a culture, but, first responders, police officers, we're the problem solvers. We're not used to being the victims. We're supposed to be the ones that are getting the victims and getting justice for people. It's rare that the police officers are the ones who are the actual victims of a crime. We're the ones who are saving people. So when the police need saving, who do we really go to? So I think that I got a lot of support, not necessarily publicly, but a lot of my friends privately supported me, literally tell me, I couldn't do the shit you're doing, keep it up, man, or keep speaking for all of us, and that meant a lot, because whether they said it or not, I was still gonna do it, but it made it a little bit easier, just knowing that I had a few people supporting me. And I also had a lot of people that were talking trash about me behind my back. I testified that, some of the racist slurs that I was called, some of the other individuals who shared with me their stories. And I remember one time I had to go to court, and there was literally another officer that I heard said, "What is he gonna do, testify that people called him names?" Like, this is one of my coworkers, so I get police are supposed to have thick skin, and that's fine. But right is right and wrong is wrong, and I refuse to be quiet and shut up about people not getting justice, especially when it's myself.
the question was, you said that no one came. Do you think there is something about the institutional culture of policing that results in that lack of support, or is there something else to which you
Well,
attribute it?
another, thank you for repeating.
Sure.
I think it goes with being political, your political stance, because had it been another group, had it been people that we consider enemy, or this group that they like or don't like would have done that, then I think we would have had a lot more support. One thing that a lot of people, and I hear this from Fox News and people who watch it, Fox News, is what about Portland? What about Minnesota? What about Black Lives Matter, Antifa? They did this, they did that. Well, we're not talking about Antifa and Black Lives Matter right now. We're talking about the Capitol. When Antifa and Black Lives Matter came in 2016 and on, I worked those demonstrations, and at no point did they breach the Capitol. At no point did they assault me and then say, I was there giving you a tour with hugs and kisses. So don't tell me that the laws of this country only apply to a certain group or a certain denomination of people just because they are your supporter or you are against them. So if you want to apply laws, apply the law equally for everybody, not just who you want.
Let me jump in real quick. I'm glad that he brought up the Portland and Minnesota and the riots of in the wake of George Floyd's killing. You know what? Those officers that were assaulted, those cities that were destroyed, those officers should stand up, and they deserve justice. Those officers were attacked in Portland. Whether it was a peaceful protest and it was a few bad apples, sure, whatever. Those officers deserve justice too, and I wish they would stand up and not, I really am a firm believer that if it wasn't for us 4 officers, not on just January 6th, but in the days afterwards, this shit would have got swept under the rug, people would have forgot about it. But us 4, along with other people, have said, hell no, we're going to get justice. And if those officers in Portland and Minnesota and all throughout the country, hell, even in D.C., if they want to stand up, I will support them because they were victims that day, and they defended their cities and their communities. So let's not make it a this versus them kind of thing. Like, the officers that got attacked that day, they were victims. The officers that got attacked at the Capitol were victims, and victims deserve justice, period.
I agree. What I was trying to allude was that they could have taken the city of Portland, Minnesota, and that would not have threatened our system of self-governance. That's what I was alluding to.
No, I know.
But,
Yeah.
but you're right. They also deserve to be recognized for what they endure. And if they're willing to come forward, then be it. When I was healing, when I was recovering, I was at the Capitol. I talked to a lot of officers, and just like Mike said, it is their right to come forward or not. But I did try to get a lot more officers to come publicly testify. You did that yourself, Harry, and a lot of them, they stay quiet, or nothing will change, or look how they're treating you guys. Why am I going to expose myself to that? So it's hard to stay quiet, at least in my part, because I risk my life, not only here, but also overseas, and I see the difference. And had it been another group doing all these things, we would have been lauded for what we did. But instead they chose Kyle, the guy who killed Rittenhouse. And that's their hero. That's their hero. Somebody who pretended a vigilante, wanting to be a police officer, that killed people. They want to praise that person, but not us, the officer who actually did and protected their own colleagues in Congress, their own elected officials. And then they go to the Justice Department the same day we are testifying to Congress, and they call them patriots and political prisoners, as if we are the officers, were the bad guys on January 6th. And I'm talking about Marjorie Taylor Greene and the other yahoos, like Mike says. Those are the people who say that they are patriots. Those are people who want to defend, not to side with the officer who risked their lives, our lives, to give them time for them to get to safety, because they were running scared that day from the monster they created themselves.
There's, with regards to not getting support, law enforcement leans conservative. You know, I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But I also think that neutrality can be an enemy in terms of putting yourself in the limelight, because when a police officer gets in the news, it is very rarely for a good thing. So there, especially following 2020, that's sort of the mindset in all law enforcement's mind, is just to avoid the camera. So I think there was a lot of pressure there, not to, because, you know, they got to think about themselves and their families. And if that's, you know, their motivation, I don't begrudge them that. And I also think it's important to note that there is support. I've gotten plenty of support from officers at MPD and otherwise. And even on January 6th, there was officers who wanted to come but were ordered not to. Because MPD, we are the DC city police, so, you know, we have to be responsible for the entire city, not just the Capitol. But even officers who showed up later that evening, and they had heard about what was going on, they were ready to go, they were pumped up, they're like, all right, let's go, let's do this. And this one platoon got assigned to guard Black Lives Matter Plaza, which, you know, is not where the battle was, but for some reason our higher-ups decided that's what needed guarding. So they were just crestfallen. They were bummed. They wanted to help out, but they couldn't. So, you know, there's a lot of reasons that we might not get the support that we were looking for. Some of them might be, some of the reasons might be more noble than others, but there's a lot of reasons. You got anything, Mike?
I think law enforcement's a microcosm of society. I think that, you know, the same disease that infects us, indifference affects the law enforcement community. I think that there were a lot of officers that also, I think, felt as though the attention that we were getting was somehow representative or perceived like, I don't know.
Game.
Well, it was like it was glamorous.
Glory seeking.
Like, you know, I got a contract with CNN, so I must be a millionaire. I barely make more money than I did as a police officer. And when I've got to pay my own, you know, health insurance, I don't. And that, you know, I walked away from a good government job and a pension. And that was terrifying for me. But I'm also a prideful person, and I wasn't going to stay in a career in which I didn't feel as though I was being respected. And so I left in a very unceremonious fashion. And so, you know, listen, all four of us have had very unique experiences, whether it was on January 6th or in the aftermath. I did not enjoy the support of law enforcement. When I left, I said I could count on 2 fingers the amount of friends that I still enjoyed within the Metropolitan Police Department, and that still reigns true. I just didn't get that support. I didn't get it from the city government. I didn't get it from the agency, but listen, I was a cop for 2 decades. I never thought that the Metropolitan Police Department was going to support me in any way that they were not legally obligated. But the rank and file, that pissed me off. And I don't think I'll ever forgive them.
Take a question here, and then we'll come to you, sir.
I may be getting ahead of the game politically, but I wondered what you thought police officers or people in law enforcement should do when they see the police power of government itself being used to undermine democracy. We saw this, for example, in the Nixon era, and more recently, a governor who tried to silence a whistleblower by sending the state police out to search her house. What do you think the police response should be in a situation like that?
Doing the right thing takes a lot of courage. I know I had done or tried to throughout my military career. When I saw something wrong, I spoke up. January 6th is not anything different. I saw that regardless of my financial or livelihood. At that time, I decided to speak up, risking that I would lose my job. I just made a phone call. Hey, I gave an interview to CNN and go from there. Just heads up. But even though I didn't have to do that, I still gave him that courtesy because I knew they would see it differently. But when you do the right thing and you still get a short end of the stick, that's when the moral injury comes in. But what the police officer had to do in that situation, that politically certain people tell them to go and do something, it's hard. It's a personal choice that you have to make yourself, regardless whether they're gonna treat you differently or not. At the end, I had to be able to look myself in the mirror and say, did I do the right thing or not? And I hope if I do something, it's worthy of my son seeing me and knowing that what I did it for the right reason, not for a political game or to get somebody else, like you said, for in revenge or ill intent.
Yeah, what can law enforcement do when we see or we are being used for more political machinations? Well, first thing first is recognize whether or not you've received a lawful order. You can't just say, I was just following orders. You have to be aware of the law and what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do, regardless of what your superiors say. If it is a lawful order, then it becomes a moral choice. And I mean, that's not easy. Do you give up? Do you take a stand? How much are you willing to sacrifice to follow your conscience? That's something that everybody has to decide for themselves every single day, and it's a very high stakes when it comes to your job and your family's well-being and all that. So, looking from the outside in at an officer who's doing something like that, there's really nothing you can do except for speak to the people who you talk to in your daily life. Say, I'm law enforcement and I don't approve of that. If you are directly involved, then you have to make that choice for yourself as to whether you're going to follow that order or give up that life.
I agree. That's a great answer, Danny. I got nothing on that.
Good job, Danny.
All right. Danny nailed it, sir.
I just have one question for all of you guys. I've talked to a lot of friends, and like that lady said earlier about people crying, a lot of friends of mine that they saw that and they just broke out in tears. And what I found out as I talked to people from all different kinds of backgrounds, they said they never felt more tied to America that day than any other day. Not 9/11, not any other day made them feel this connection that they were Americans, connected to that one thing. And you guys were there in the middle of all that. And I'm just wondering, that's never happened. I mean, what you went through that day has never been demonstration after demonstration after demonstration. And nothing like that has ever happened. And from what I understand, did you even think that was possible that day? And as you went through it, and after you reflected on what happened that day, what was your reflections of America for you that day?
I hear a lot about how people claiming what America is, what America isn't, what it means to be American. You know, this is not American behavior. This is American behavior, whether it's, you know, letting gay people exist or having books in school or whatever people are arguing about now. If you're an American and you believe it or you do it, it is by definition American. It's not. It's poor rhetoric to argue that something is not American when Americans are doing it or they believe in it. So whether you like it or not, these things are American. So yeah, when you get this behavior, when you have insurrections and people arguing for secession, when you have people trying to restrict voting rights, it's American. It's who we are. It might not be who you are, but America is more than you. It's us. So we just have to do our best to move the needle of America in a direction that's more fair and equitable and something that we can be proud of.
In my case, I wasn't born in this country like them three. So not by choice, but I do remember seeing movies and things and stuff like the American values, the American democracy is the best, all these great things, hearing it from abroad. And when I finally get a chance to come here legally, I was proud. The only thing that I knew how to say in English was one and plantain. So,
That's all you need, really.
well, according to DeSantis, yes, that's the only thing we need. A little jab. But, you know, hearing all these things about how great America is or was from abroad, it gave me a different perspective. And when I got here, I struggle, obviously, the lack of language, financial means, and all stuff like that, family matters. But I made it a choice to become who I am now by continuing to strive and continue trying to be better, regardless of all the obstacles that I had. And to the point that led me to the Army in fighting for this country that I was not born in, and spreading democracy, as George Bush said that we were doing there. And mind you, with those, regardless of the intent or how we ended up in Iraq, I did my best to do my best and help those people in the mission that I was taking part of. And so I took that and brought it here to U.S. again and continue to grow with that to make this country a lot better than what I found it, to help me. The Army opened a lot of opportunities to me, but I also took those opportunities because of what I had done before. And what happened on January 6th, to me, it was inconceivable. Having lived in another country, having gone to another country to fight for this country, to prevent or stop what happened here in another country, that, to me, it was inconceivable. It was just, I'm being crushed right next to Hodges, and I'm like, what the fuck is the president? Where the fuck is the president? In my mind, I'm fighting him in the tunnel is. And losing air to breathing. And I'm like, okay, I guess this is how I'm going to die, because this was so un-American. Because we risk our life to prevent this type of things from happening in another country. And yet it was happening here by our own people. And I don't know, whether it's American or not, it still happened. And I think we should do everything possible to prevent it from happening again.
I was at the time quoted anonymously in the impeachment hearing, and Jamie Raskin quoted an officer who he didn't know who it was. That ended up being me. It was after everything, all the dust had settled in the Capitol, and you're looking around in the rotunda, it's feces on the wall, it's torn up flags, it's Trump hats, empty cans of pepper spray, all in the rotunda, fire extinguisher, the stuff inside of it covered the marble floors in the rotunda. And you're just sitting in this once great place as desecrated. And I remember I was sitting down and I literally asked that question, is this America? I asked one of my coworkers as I was sitting next to, and I just relived that day, some of the things that I went through that day. And I was crying, and it was because it was so heartbreaking that this is America. And yeah, like Danny said, it is America. It may not be you, it may not be your friends, your neighbors, but this is this country, and it's sad. One of the things that made it more sad is because, like on 9/11, it was us versus them. And January 6th, it was us versus us. And it divided this country more so than unified it. So everybody had to pick a side on January 6th. Whereas on the 6th, on 9/11, it was easy. It was somebody that was attacking all of us. They didn't care what your political party was. They were just coming after you because you're an American. Now they're coming after you because you voted for this guy or that guy. And that's where everybody had to pick a side. So I think that's maybe why January 6th was a little more, not necessarily unifying, but dividing, and everybody had to pick a side that day. But yeah, like Danny said, it is America, and it sucks. It sucks that this is where we are.
The fact that thousands of Americans attacked the Capitol on January 6th, it shocked me, but it didn't surprise me. I mean, if you were in any way in tune with the way 50% of this country felt in the weeks and months and even years leading up to January 6th, I think you could sense that something was brewing that was going to be violent. What surprised me was the fact that there were elected officials, members of the Department of Justice, appointed officials that were willing to go along with the insanity, that the President of the United States was willing to do something that would be ultimately so destructive for the country that he swore to serve and the Constitution that he swore to protect. And also, on a micro level, as a police officer, a career police officer, it shocked me that law enforcement in America in 2021 was so ill prepared for, something as, let's say as basic as human beings charging up the steps of a building. Where was the communication that was supposed to be taking place in the aftermath of 9/11, all the lessons that we learned, which, I'll tell you, as a cop for 20 years, we suck at disseminating and deciphering intelligence domestically. We're bad. After 9/11, we lost sight of, homegrown extremism in this country. We put all our eggs in the overseas basket, and look what happened. But I was really disgusted by the lack of preparedness by my agency, by the city, by U.S. Capitol Police. I thought it was disgraceful. And going back to an earlier theme, betrayal. Well, as one of the guys that fought in the Capitol building, watching the chief of my department and the chief of these other agencies come forward and point fingers and play the blame game in the aftermath in a congressional hearing, I thought was shocking. Shocking but not surprising. And as somebody who's bared it all, hoping for change, watching people behave that way, such cowardice, you know. That's like the ultimate betrayal to me.
And one last thing on that is whether it was American or not, but some of those writers themselves, as they were attacking me, probably Hodges as well, when they were trying to convince him that join them, they were attacking us with the same American flag that I swore to protect, with the same flag that went overseas to protect, under the same disguise that I'm doing this for you. And in my mind, I'm like, let me get this straight. You fucker think that I want you to attack me, so 2 years from now, I could be sitting down on MC to give a panel, in front of the panel, to tell them what the fuck they did to me. That's inconceivable. Because I want fame or game out of it. No, I'd rather have my life back the same way. My career was cut short 7 years before retirement, just like Mike Fano. And I wrestled with that decision, should I stay or go? And once I made that decision in October, after finding a picture of Donald Trump's tape to my computer, to torture me, I was like, no, fuck this. My own colleagues doing that. And to me, that was the ultimate betrayal. And I left. And my mental health had increased for the better part. But it is American what happened. It is what happened. And they could dilute it. They could publish, like Ken McCarthy today, he released 41,000 hours of footage of the Capitol, as if that's going to help them show that there were no hugs and kisses in there. But what he doesn't realize is that they were the target of what happened, that he was running for his life as one of the leaders that was rushed to safety because the time that we gave him to get to those rooms. And he's playing political favors to Marjorie Taylor Greene and whoever. And I'm like, do you realize that putting out those videos, now you're giving foreign and domestic terrorists information that they will use to attack you in the future? And God forbid, we're not going to be there. But hopefully the officers who are there, they're going to do their job, and I hope they do. Because it's hard. When they're running to safety, we are running to the fight, to address that threat. And that's why he doesn't realize. But I guess he'll have to give some answer on that if that happens. Because it will be nobody else's fault but his, if something happened as a result of releasing those footages.
Okay, I think we have time for one last audience question.
Thank you. Hi, so I'm Bree, and I have like a 2, maybe 3-part question. I'm going to be really quick. Those of you that have sons, nephews, even daughters, or anyone, would you recommend them joining the police department? How do you feel in the future that what is going to happen with the police, with all this defund the police? The left and the right hates the cops. And then we have this mass misinformation on Twitter, Marjorie Taylor Greene, we have lunatic QAnon people on committee hearings and running this country. Do you feel like we can escape that and we can get back to normalcy, we can get back to real democracy, we can stop talking about Hunter Biden's penis and start helping DC? And with that, I'm not sure if y'all recognize me, but I do a lot of protesting, counter-protesting in DC, and I have the unique experience of dealing with all the divisions. And I actually, soon to be divorced from a sheriff's deputy, but when I started my protesting, I was all ACAB, police brutality. And I actually started having really great experiences with some of the MPD and then ultimately the Capitol Police. I kind of chased the J6ers around and scream at them. And what I'm seeing on the streets is pretty much everyone is not supporting the police, from on the streets to the people whose lives you saved. I mean, what's the guy, and now he's wearing a gun pin instead of a flag in Congress. These people are telling you these experiences did not happen, that this was a peaceful protest, that these are political prisoners. Outside of the regional jail in Southeast DC, we have Proud Boys, we have Ashley Babbitt's mother, we have Oath Keepers, we have 3%ers, all of them with no permit, holding Brian Sicknick's face as their propaganda, and yet they think that all these inmates did nothing wrong, and you guys are what are the problem. And I think pretty much all of us here know that is not the case. Everyone here seems to be pretty sane. So how do we go forward? How do we make changes? How do we protect this country? How do we stay safe, but how do we keep you safe? I see that again, I was married to a sheriff's deputy. There is a severe lack of training. Someone asked why you didn't use deadly force. And I remember when this whole thing happened 2 years ago, I didn't know much about this, and I thought the same thing. If it was BLM, they would have shot him, right? And then I've learned so much since then, and it's because you're trained, because you're not just 18 or 21 with a GED, a 90-day police academy, and no real life.
I'm gonna answer. I got your point.
Got
I got you.
you.
I got you.
I talk a lot.
I'll try my best to answer this as simply, poignant, and very short as possible. You got to be the change that you want to see. Period. You can't be run out of something. If something's bad, you're either going to succumb to it or you're going to stand up against it. Just as simple as that. And I feel like that's what a lot of us are doing. We realize that we're outnumbered, but principle, morals, conscience, all those things come into play. And you doing, Sergeant Gunnell, he's doing hopefully what his son grows up and says, I'm proud of my daddy for doing the right thing. I'm doing the same thing for my daughter. I hope that she's proud of me, said I did the right thing. Everybody out here, I hope that everybody's proud that I'm standing up and doing what I think is right. And even if you don't, that's fine. I'm able to look at myself in the mirror every night and say, I did what I think is right. And I think it just takes a few people doing what's right to actually make a change. And just as simple as that. That's all whether that's policing, whether that's politicians, whatever. People, and that goes back to my earlier point. Get frustrated, but you can't stop. You can't stop fighting. You can't stop pushing back. And I said this before, until there's nothing that can be done, there's always something that can be done. So keep doing that and living by that. And I think that hopefully that answers your question about why we're doing what we're doing.
Yes. So. Thank you for doing that.
With regards to would I encourage someone to become a police officer today? Selfishly, yes. We desperately need people. All law enforcement agencies across the country are hemorrhaging officers every single day, month, year, and we're not replacing them. I would make sure that you know what you're signing up for. It's an extremely difficult time to be in law enforcement, but there's nothing like it. It's a good job, as much as we can complain. And MPD has a $20,000 hiring bonus right now, if anyone's interested. But yeah, we will always need law enforcement officers, regardless of how everybody hates us, and many people want us to not exist or defund us or think that we're not necessary. We absolutely are. It's necessary to have people enforce the law to continue civilization. So that's something that not many other careers or professions can say about themselves. So yeah, if you have the physical and moral integrity to do so, I would encourage it.
It's not because you want the 3-day weekend.
I absolutely want the 3-day weekend, yes.
I had the same question I'm being asked by my son probably like 2 weeks ago. And I told him, I went through what I went through, and I could tell you that being a police officer is hard, but yet it is a honorable profession. You had to be able to, and I level with him, I told him, like, it wasn't easy for me to become a police officer, the language barrier mainly. But you also had to have a good character, a good head on your shoulder, and be able to empathize with people regardless of what they're going through, because when people call the police, it's because they cannot handle things themselves. And it's hard because the police officer had to be the psychologist, the nurse, the father, the compassionate person. So you had to be able to wear a lot of hats, not just I'm the police officer, I'm the law, and you do what I say. Sometimes it just take talking to people, and that will suffice to calm them down. Sometimes you have to put your hands on it. But I did tell him, before last year, I tried to, my wife told me that, hey, I think it would do a lot of good if you talk to our son about what happened to you, because I tried to shield them from a lot of those things. The media, the trial, the things that the way that we were being portrayed. And he kept asking her, why does he continue to go on TV when he don't have to? And one day, I think he saw me very emotional because that happened right after my first or second interview. And I never talked to him about it. I just told him, and last year, I got him on a walk with my dog, and I told him, look, what happened to me, it was because people lie. People lie to other people. And remember when you don't like losing a basketball game, you get upset, you get frustrated? Well, don't be like that. And a lot of people, this guy, Trump, the president, he lied to people. And because of that, led them to feel entitled to do certain things, and because they wanted to win. But I want you to know that if you do go and want to become that police officer, I will support you. But I don't recommend it, because what I did is for you to have a better chance, another profession. And then he asked, what about the Army? I'm like, I already did that too. So find something else. But if you do, I will fully support you with everything that I have. I'll try to guide you as best as I can. Both are good professions. You have to do it for the right reasons, not just because you want a gun or power or have the ability to take somebody's right. Because if you do that, then you know better than those people who try to breach the Capitol.
Is there anything you'd like to add, Mike?
Well, I'm a girl dad. I've got 4 daughters. And while I tell my daughters that, there's absolutely nothing that they can't do or achieve in this country, there are a few professions that I would prefer that they not engage in. And there are a few that I would do everything in my power to prevent them from engaging in. And one of them is a career in law enforcement. Now, I loved my job. I loved being a police officer. I loved working in narcotics. That was, That was everything to me, and I was fortunate because in my career I did things the way I wanted to do them all the time, and that's not that doesn't happen all that often in a paramilitary organization. But it's not me saying that I don't want my kids to participate in this profession. It has nothing to do with my experience in the aftermath of January 6th. It doesn't have anything to do with the negative attention in recent years that's been drawn towards law enforcement. In fact, I think that it's important that we have this reflection period and that we start to acknowledge some of the shortcomings of American law enforcement. That being said, I think that the way that we're going about this conversation is completely unproductive. And so in a lot of ways, I feel like our law enforcement officers are being set up for failure. We demand from these human beings that they're able to make unbelievably complex, complicated decisions in split-second timing. Yet we don't provide them with the training and resources that they need to accomplish these tasks. So, we love to sensationalize things, and hell, I know about it more than anyone because I work for goddamn CNN. And they love to shit on cops. When a cop does something wrong, they love to make a huge splash story about that. And you might notice, where's Mike Fanone in this conversation? Well, these media entities have an agenda too. And they don't necessarily want to hear from the street cop that was out there for 20 years. And that's a reality. It's unfortunate, but I also, I think I was naive in thinking that taking that job, I would somehow be able to contribute to the conversation in a productive manner in 1 minute and 30-second TV hits. But that was on me. I was naive. But I think that it's important that if we are going to earn that level of sacrifice and dedication that we demand from people that put the badge on every single day, that we, lower the temperature and start to have real meaningful conversations about what we want from our police officers and what we're prepared to give them so that they can accomplish those tasks in the way that we want them to. It's give and take. And right now, all I see is, open season on cops in a lot of ways. And so, that's not a career that I'm going to steer anybody towards.
Thank you. Well, you all have been a tremendous audience, and I am so amazed by the candor and the vulnerability that I have heard sitting at this table this evening. I really appreciate it. Before I bid you all adieu, I'd like to give a special thank you to the folks who helped make tonight possible. Lee Ennis and Joe Stump from the History and Political Science Department, who conceived of this event. Doctors Benjamin and Praneta Hernandez, whose offices supported this event, and our fantastic campus safety, facilities, and MCTV teams. This really was a group effort. And of course, again, I thank all of you for your time tonight, for your thoughtful engagement in this dialogue. And finally, to Aquilino and Harry and Danny and Mike, although hundreds, if not thousands, of individuals swear an oath to protect our Constitution every year, the dedication to democratic principles that you displayed on January 6th truly was unparalleled. And while I can't adequately articulate my gratitude for your service, I can thank you for the opportunity to share this space with you this evening. And I can only hope that every aspiring law enforcement officer here at Montgomery College, whether you recommend that they enter the profession or not, looks to you for their inspiration, that they look to you as role models as they engage in service to their communities and to their nation. So thank you all again for having been here, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening. Let's hear it for our panel.